Alright, let's talk about E.M. Forster, one of the most important English novelists of the early 20th century and someone who beautifully bridged the world of late Victorian ideals with the spirit of modernism. His full name was Edward Morgan Forster, and he wasn't just a novelist, he was also an essayist, a librettist, and even a 20-time Nobel Prize nominee. Quite impressive, right? Forster's fiction explores class, hypocrisy, and the barriers between people, whether those barriers are social, cultural, or emotional. His novels often begin as polite comedies of manners, but gradually open into deep reflections on connection, tolerance, and humanity. Let's start with his early work. His first novel, Where Angels Fear to Tread, 1905, introduces one of his lifelong themes, the clash between the emotional openness of Southern Europe and the restraint of English society. That title, by the way, has been asked in exam. Then came The Longest Journey in 1907, one of his most serious and introspective novels. It warns against isolation and intellectual detachment, again, a key point that has been asked in exam. A year later, he gave us one of his most beloved works, A Room with a View, 1908. Here, Forster celebrates freedom, spontaneity, and the awakening of independent women themes that marked his shift from the old Victorian world toward modern life. His masterpiece from the pre-war period, though, is Howard's End, 1910. This novel unites two very different families, the liberal artistic Schlegels and the practical business-minded Wilcoxes. Through them, Forster explores the need to connect, his famous moral vision summed up in the line, "Only connect." The ending, where Howard's End becomes a symbol of the link between imagination and the earth, has been asked in exam as well. Then came the catastrophe of the First World War, which really shook Forster's optimistic worldview. During the war, he served with the Red Cross in Alexandria, Egypt, and it was during those years that he began to engage deeply with India, a place that would inspire his greatest work. That, of course, is A Passage to India, published in 1924, and the novel that brought Forster international fame and critical success. This novel is always an exam favorite. The story centers around the clash of cultures during the British Raj. The young English woman Adela, quested, and the kind, sensitive doctor Aziz find themselves at the heart of a misunderstanding that reveals the deep tensions between colonizer and colonized. Characters like Fielding and Mrs. Moore embody humanism, truth, and empathy, Forster's moral ideals. But by the end, reconciliation seems impossible. The novel closes on a note of tension, friendship, and empire simply cannot coexist. Critics often describe A Passage to India as a conflict between earth and imagination, between rational control and emotional truth. Forster doesn't resolve it, but he captures it perfectly. Now, stylistically, Forster's prose is freer and more conversational than that of his Victorian predecessors. He drops moral preaching in favor of gentle irony and emotional realism. His novels feel modern because they explore private experience within a rapidly changing social world. Later in life, Forster wrote essays, short stories, and biographies, but one of his most remarkable works remained unpublished until after his death, Maurice, written around 1913 to 14 but only published in 1971. It's a novel about homosexual love and the search for personal authenticity. Its publication posthumously after Forster's death has been repeatedly asked in exam. Finally, Forster also spoke of something he called paganism, not in the religious sense, but as a return to natural feeling, connection with the body and the earth, and emotional honesty. His Mediterranean settings, especially in novels like A Room with a View, express that vision beautifully. So, to sum it up for your quick recall, Forster bridges Victorian morality and modern humanism. His 5 major novels: Where Angels Fear to Tread, The Longest Journey, A Room with a View, Howard's End, and A Passage to India. Plus Maurice, written early but published in 1971 after his death. And don't forget A Passage to India remains his crowning achievement, where personal connection and political conflict meet in one of the most haunting endings in modern fiction. Let's take a look at E. M. Forster's early novels Where Angels Fear to Tread, 1905, A Room with a View, 1908, and Howard's End, 1910. Together, they form a fascinating picture of Edwardian England, polite on the surface but full of emotional conflict underneath. First, we have Where Angels Fear to Tread. The title itself comes straight from Alexander Pope's An Essay on Criticism. For fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Both the line and the reference have been asked in exam, so make a note of that. The story follows Lilia Hareton, a young English widow who travels to Italy hoping for a new beginning. There, in the small town of Monteriano, she meets and marries Gino Carella, a handsome but poor Italian, and yes, that marriage has been asked in exam. Her conservative English in-laws, the Haretons, are horrified. They send Philip Hareton to bring her home. That's another exam clue. But before he can, Lilia tragically dies in childbirth, leaving behind a baby boy. The Haretons then decide to rescue the child from what they see as Gino's unrefined foreign life. However, Caroline Abbott, a friend of Lilia's, joins Philip and begins to question their motives. Should they really interfere? Is it moral to impose their English values on someone else's life? The novel's shocking ending, the child's accidental death, underlines Forster's message. The danger of meddling in others' lives. That line, by the way, has been directly asked in exam. Next comes A Room with a View, published in 1908, and another exam favorite. It's a story about a young woman discovering herself amid the cultural constraints of Edwardian England. The novel moves between Italy and England, both settings having appeared in exam questions. It follows Lucy Honeychurch, who visits Florence seeking adventure and emotional awakening. At her pension Bertolini, she meets George Emerson, a passionate young man who sees life very differently from her genteel upbringing. But when she returns to England, Lucy becomes engaged to the stiff and intellectual Cecil Vyse, also asked in exam. She tries to suppress her feelings for George until one day she realizes the truth. She had an odd feeling in her heart, Forster writes, marking her moment of emotional clarity. Eventually, Lucy breaks her engagement and chooses love over propriety. In the final scene, she and George return to Florence, where they find both love and freedom, a moment captured beautifully in the line, "Love is of the soul." Both those lines are exam favorites. A Room with a View is all about honesty, spontaneity, and choosing emotional truth over social convention, a theme that runs through all of Forster's work. And finally, Howard's End, published in 1910, the novel that many critics call Forster's masterpiece of social vision. The title itself refers to an English country house that becomes a symbol of continuity and moral inheritance. The story centers on two families, the Schlegels, who are imaginative, cultured, and idealistic, and the Wilcoxes, who are pragmatic and materialistic. These two families represent two halves of England, intellect versus commerce, spirit versus property, and this contrast has been repeatedly asked in exam. At first, Margaret Schlegel befriends Ruth Wilcox, the kind and spiritual matriarch of the Wilcox family. Before dying, Ruth writes a note willing her beloved home, Howard's End, to Margaret. That fact has been asked in exams several times. But the Wilcox family suppresses the will, ignoring her wishes. Later, Margaret marries Henry Wilcox, Ruth's widower. Through compassion and strength, she gradually helps him confront his emotional rigidity. In the end, Margaret inherits Howard's End, restoring the house and symbolically human connection to its rightful harmony. Howard's End carries Forster's famous message, "Only connect." It's his plea for balance between reason and emotion, intellect and compassion, self and society. So in these three novels we see Forster's evolution. Where Angels Fear to Tread warns against meddling in others' lives. A Room with a View celebrates love and emotional honesty. Howard's End unites intellect and humanity under the ideal of connection. Each story moves between England and Italy, reason and passion, order and spontaneity, showing us that the real journey in Forster's fiction is always toward greater understanding and empathy. Forster's A Passage to India, published in 1924, a novel born from Forster's own experiences in the subcontinent. The title actually comes from Walt Whitman's poem Passage to India from Leaves of Grass, and that detail has been asked in exam. Now, the story opens with arrival. Two English women, Adela Quested and Mrs. Moore, travel to British India. Adela is engaged to Ronnie Heaslop, the city magistrate, while Mrs. Moore, Ronnie's mother, soon meets Dr. Aziz, a young Muslim doctor. Their friendship begins with warmth and respect, a rare moment of human connection across colonial lines. And yes, that first meeting has been asked in exam. Soon after, the British officials throw a bridge party, supposedly to bridge cultural gaps, but in reality, it only highlights them. Adela meets the liberal-minded Englishman, Mr. Fielding, who invites her and Mrs. Moore to tea. That bridge party reference has appeared in exam more than once. At Fielding's tea party, a genuine friendship forms among Aziz, Fielding, Adela, and Mrs. Moore, a fragile little island of understanding. During this gathering, Aziz invites the women to visit the famous Marabar Caves. Now comes the turning point, the Marabar Caves scene, one of the most haunting episodes in modern fiction. Inside the caves, Mrs. Moore feels disturbed by the endless echo that repeats every sound, a symbol of meaninglessness. Adela, meanwhile, experiences confusion and panic, imagining she is being assaulted. The echo and Adela's illusion of assault have both been asked in exam. Aziz is soon arrested and accused of attacking Adela, and this sparks massive racial tension between the British and the Indians. Only Fielding stands by Aziz, insisting on his innocence, which isolates him from his fellow Englishmen. Meanwhile, Mrs. Moore's fate adds to the novel's mystery. Disillusioned and apathetic, she is sent back to England but dies on the voyage. That too has been asked in exam. Her death leaves India divided emotionally and symbolically. Then comes the trial scene, one of the most dramatic in English fiction. During the hearing, Adela realizes her mistake and admits that Aziz never touched her. He is acquitted, but the trial exposes deep cracks in the relationship between the colonizers and the colonized. That theme of mistrust has been directly tested in exam. In the aftermath, Adela quietly leaves India, breaking her engagement to Ronnie. But even the friendship between Fielding and Aziz suffers. Suspicion and politics poison everything. 2 years later, in the final section, at Mao, Fielding returns to India with his wife Stella, and yes, that's another exam clue. By now, Aziz has withdrawn from friendship with the British, dreaming instead of Indian independence before any true friendship can exist. That's how Forster closes the novel, suggesting that genuine unity between East and West must wait until freedom and equality are achieved. So, A Passage to India is more than a colonial story. It's a philosophical journey about connection, misunderstanding, and the echoing spaces between cultures. Now let's turn to a very different side of Forster, one that stayed secret until long after his death. Maurice is a novel Forster wrote way back in 1913 and 1914, but it wasn't published until 1971, long after his passing, and yes, that delayed publication is a recurring exam question. The novel tells the story of Maurice Hall, an upper middle-class Englishman discovering his homosexuality in a society that refuses to accept it. The story follows him from his school days through Cambridge and into adulthood. Forster's exploration of same-sex love was revolutionary for its time, open, honest, and humane, which is why Maurice remains a pioneering LGBTQ work today, and that point has been asked in exam. What inspired it? Forster's visit to Edward Carpenter, the poet, philosopher, and early socialist who lived openly with his partner George Merrill. Carpenter's relationship deeply influenced Forster and Maurice's love story between Maurice Hall and Alex Cudder. a working-class gamekeeper, mirrors Carpenter and Merrill's real-life partnership. Both names, by the way, have been asked in exam. The novel portrays love not as tragic but redemptive, ending with the lovers finding freedom in each other rather than shame. But Forster knew such a book couldn't appear in Edwardian England, so he shared it only with trusted friends like Siegfried Sassoon, Lytton Strachey, and Carpenter himself. When Morris was finally published in 1971, readers realized how far ahead Forster had been. He had imagined a world of acceptance more than 50 years before society was ready for it. So, together, A Passage to India and Morris show Forster's two great quests, one for understanding across cultures and one for understanding across identities. Both novels echo his lifelong belief, only connect. Alright, let's take a moment to talk about Forster, one of the most humane and thoughtful voices of early 20th century English literature. We'll begin with his critical work, Aspects of the Novel, published in 1927, a book that, believe me, every student of fiction should know by heart. It grew out of a series of lectures Forster delivered at Trinity College, Cambridge, and yes, that's been asked in exam. In this book, Forster discusses what he calls the 7 universal aspects of the novel, things that every novel must have no matter the time, place, or writer. Those aspects include story, people or characters, plot, fantasy, prophecy, pattern, and rhythm. Each one gives us a way to understand how novels are built and why they move us. He draws examples from a wide range of classic texts from Don Quixote to War and Peace to show how great novelists handle these elements. His tone is friendly and conversational, never stuffy. In fact, Forster famously said he preferred to be a casual friend to fiction rather than a strict critic. That's what makes this book feel alive. It's as if he's talking directly to you about books he loves. Now, critics have long debated Forster's approach. Some call it a normative theory of novel writing, meaning he quietly suggests how novels ought to be written, even though he pretends not to set rules, and that debate has been asked in exam. Writers like W. Somerset Maugham even said they learned the art of novel writing from Forster's insights. Virginia Woolf, on the other hand, admired his honesty but also teased him for being too casual, saying that he refused to lay down any definitive laws of fiction. Both of these opinions, Maugham's and Woolf's, have appeared in exam questions. So, Aspects of the Novel isn't just literary criticism, it's a kind of meditation on storytelling itself, how it works, why it matters, and how readers connect with the people who live inside novels. Now, let's shift from fiction to faith, or rather, to Forster's idea of humanism. In 1938, he wrote an essay called What I Believe, published in The Nation. This piece is often called a humanist manifesto, and it's one of the most moving personal essays of the century. Forster opens with that famous line, "I do not believe in belief." That quote has been asked in exam many times. What he means is that rigid ideologies, whether religious or political, can become dangerous. Instead, Forster argues for something deeply personal: kindness, tolerance, and private decency. He says it's better to rely on personal relationships than on abstract systems of thought. Love, he insists, is the one force that can truly connect humanity. He divides people into two kinds, those who believe in power and those who believe in love, and of course Forster stands with the lovers. Throughout the essay, he warns against tyranny, totalitarianism, and herd mentality, which was spreading across Europe at the time. Forster prefers individual conscience to institutional authority. To him, the moral courage to act kindly, even in small ways, is worth more than any political creed. He sums up his entire philosophy in one of his most beautiful sentences: "Personal relations are the important thing forever and ever." That line too has been directly asked in exam. So, if Aspects of the Novel shows Forster's mind at work, What I Believe reveals his heart. Together they embody his liberal humanism, a quiet faith in decency, sympathy, and human connection. Forster reminds us that even when the world seems ruled by power, love and understanding remain our best defense.